just remember being utterly terrified, and I just thought, I will never, ever, ever be financially free. Gave me a lesson that I needed. My old definitions of success were the highest paid person, the biggest bonus, the highest sales number. None of that means anything if I'm not happy. I just need to know I'm happy. And when that's truly enough, then I know. This was kind of like my second family. It really was. And I think if I had to categorise them now, the biggest thing as to why we're so close is that.
Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome to The Company You Keep. If you're building something ambitious, a business, a career, a new chapter, then you already know this. Who you surround yourself with changes everything. But most people leave their inner circle to chance. This show is about changing that on purpose. Each week, I sit down with founders, operators, creators, and leaders to unpack one thing: the relationships that shape them. Not just the shiny ones, the real ones. The colleague who would open a door when no one else would. The mentor who challenged their thinking at the right time. The friend who told them the truth when it hurt. This isn't about networking, it's about the voices we trust when the spotlight's off and the stakes are high. Because momentum is great, but the right relationships, they make it last. If you've ever thought, I'm doing this alone, this show's for you. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to The Company You Keep. I'm Jack Aston, and this podcast is all about one simple idea. The people you surround yourself with shape everything. Your career, your confidence, your opportunities, and ultimately the life you get to live. Today, you'll hear from somebody who's lived that truth at every stage of her journey. Toni Phoenix-Coles grew up in a small working class town, and a scholarship to grammar school dropped her into a completely new world. It was tough, but it lit a spark for her ambition, and it was the first of many sliding doors moments where the company she kept changed her path. From the early hustle of recruitment in Leeds to leading a growing high-performing team in Manchester, to being blindsided by a career curveball that forced her to reset everything. Toni's story is full of those make or break decisions we all face. What is really inspiring is how she's rebuilt, not by chasing titles or bonuses, but by designing a business and life that centers on her true drivers, her family, her health, and creating space for other people to grow. In this conversation, we talk about resilience, reinvention, and the power of the inner circle you build around you. By the end, you'll see why Toni believes success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become and who you choose to have by your side along the way. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Toni Phoenix-Coles. Toni, thank you very much for joining us. For people who haven't met you or don't know you, please can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. Well, firstly, thank you for having me and inviting me. That was really nice to have that reaching out from yourself. So my name is Toni Phoenix-Coles. I am currently a co-founder of a group of businesses called the Redefining Group. 4 years ago, my partner and I set those businesses up. Initially, there was a recruitment business called Define Talent. Both of us have approximately 20 years in technology recruitment and HR recruitment. So we thought we would utilise our skills and our network, but also support and spend more time with our family. That was our primary driver. Around 8 years ago, I qualified as a coach. It was my longer term view, thinking that I may exit the recruitment industry, and my real passion was around people. I love the complexities, the uniqueness, just everything about great people, what makes them tick, what decisions they make, the journeys that they go on. And actually, it was through my own personal coaching journey that was very transformative for myself. And it just felt like this gift that I couldn't keep quiet, because I know what I went through, and I felt I just had to enable and share that with others. So after, it was around 2 years, I think, my training, and I qualified in 2018 with a longer term view to becoming a coach myself. and I've kept that mostly within a business and executive setting. It actually dovetailed really nicely because in our recruitment business, we actually now offer coaching as part of an aftercare service. And then about a year ago, I was on holiday in my favourite holiday destination, Ibiza. And I was just, as you do, dreaming, how can I come here much more often and it not cost me an absolute fortune. And I was thinking about doing some coaching in Ibiza. There's not really a big tech hub, so that probably wasn't going to wash doing any recruitment there. But I also was very mindful that I needed some space for myself. I'm really into health, nutrition, fitness, strength and conditioning, mindset. And I was looking for a retreat that enabled all of that. And what I found, whilst it looked like it was ticking a lot of those boxes, there was a primary focus on one particular area. For example, it might be a yoga retreat, it might be a spiritual retreat, it might have been quite a corporate retreat, or just a fitness retreat. And I wanted a bit of everything, including the coaching. And I am a person that just, if I have an idea, I'll just get on with it. And I remember sitting in Ibiza, I put one LinkedIn post out, and I think it got 10,000 views, a few hundred comments, and I just felt really enthused. That could have been the daiquiris, absolutely, but that just made me do the next step. But essentially, I booked a villa, I booked a yoga teacher, and I essentially wrote a program for a week and hosted for 10 people in that October. That was the first one. It went great, and I now have a plan to try and do more of them. So I guess to finish off my employment, if you will, I also run wellness retreats.
Well, let's go. Brilliant introduction. Let's, like I do often with you, let's go back to the right at the beginning. What do people need to know about your upbringing, education, your early life that will help them understand the person that you became now?
Okay. I would say I am from a working class background. My dad was a farmer. Went to a really small little country school, and I was super fortunate to get a scholarship to a really good grammar school for free. It was actually called an assisted place, so it's where you show academic potential but you're under a certain financial bracket. That was an absolutely top three sliding doors pivotal moment of my whole life. Going from a school with 8 people in my year to a really large school, half an hour away, on a coach in Blackpool, had to wear a bow tie. And I mean, even just getting the bus from the little town I was in, if you see a girl in a bow tie, can't even tell you the stuff I got chucked at me at the bus stop. So it wasn't very pleasant, but it was very resilient building, that character building. And it was being in a different environment. And actually, I was thinking about what you'd said about the company that you keep. And I just had a 7-year window of my life where the environment that I was in was just entirely different to what it would have been if I'd have just gone to the comp feeder school. Pros and cons, by all means, but it truly was quite a key making of the person that I became. The main thing was around the ambition and the expectation to succeed amongst everybody there. As I say, lots of cons with that, pressurising parents, people with a lot of money. Some of those people were not so kind because of their money, and it really was a true sense of character building. But I loved my time there, and there was an expectation. I mean, I filled out a UCAS form because that was a compulsory lesson to fill out a UCAS form. So university wasn't a question, it was just the next step. And I don't think I would have thought like that. Now, bearing in mind, this was in, let me think what year I went to uni. 2003. Okay, so you know, I have a slightly different opinion on university now and the opportunities and the kind of people that it suits, etc. But for me at the time, going to university was the second most pivotal moment in my whole life, and it was completely down to the company in which I kept.
Did you enjoy school then, though, when you were there? So he's taken you completely out of your comfort zone into an entirely different environment, different type of people, different type of background. Did you feel like you enjoyed it? Did you thrive in that environment, or was it scary and different?
I definitely thrived as a summary of the 7 years. I was really fortunate because I was bright and I was good at sport. And I just think that gives you a bit of an advantage if you're at school, because you are welcomed, you have your team environments, and you almost have like your natural groups. But it was scary, you know. I had a nickname, which was The Voice. I think I had that for about the first 18 months. I had sixth formers because I had quite a rough, masculine Preston voice. Everybody else had either come from elocution lessons or much more polished backgrounds, shall we say. So that was really tough, being called The Voice. I stupidly fell into the trap. I'm naturally quite a confident person, and I was at primary school. And I think it was literally in the first week, maybe the first day, and my form teacher said to our class who would like to read out in assembly. And I'm just one of those people that will put my hand up first. And the only advice
Yeah,
was
just say yes.
read slow, loud, and clear. And that was it. So yeah, I was terrified, you know, 9-ish, 100 people. And I just remember standing on this stage and I just read way too loud than I needed to. And there was just an eruption of laughter. And from there on, I was nicknamed The Voice. Hugely embarrassing. It was an absolute swallow me moment. Yeah. Kids are brutal though, aren't they?
Kids are brutal, aren't they? I think a lot of people will probably have memories of things in their childhood or teenage years, or actually, never mind childhood, teenage years. Those swallow me moments that you don't forget, and they kind of stick
No, I
with you.
definitely
And
don't forget that. I even
sometimes you
think
might,
I'm going pink now.
yeah, exactly. I remember I was doing a placement with British Gas. And we had to talk about what you'd learnt during that placement, and I'd spent a summer working with them, and I would have been, I don't know, 18 or 19, stood on a stage in front of people at the end of the summer placement, and I entirely froze, completely froze, completely bumbled the whole thing, forgot exactly what I was going to say, so embarrassed. But I do remember it. It was, like you say, brutal at the time. Now these are all like adults, so they were very like, it's okay, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But it definitely helped me, like, now and over the last few years and the rest of your career, because I probably was a little bit underprepared,
Okay.
probably. And now, I always thoroughly for all of these kind of things to make sure you're not, I don't have that standing on a stage moment again. So you then went, so you were at school, and then you cast foreman. So you did go off to university. Where did you go and what did you do?
So I went to Leeds Uni because, as I said, that's what everybody did. I just picked A levels that I was good at and that I enjoyed. I didn't have any family members that had ever been to university. I couldn't get really any advice on what to do. I certainly don't think there was ever any form of playbook that listed off the hundreds of thousands available jobs. You literally know teacher, medical professions, lawyer, shopkeeper. You think there's a list of like 10 job titles only, which I think is a failure really within the education. It's probably better now, but it wasn't then. So I actually wrote 2 UCAS forms because my 2 favourite subjects were economics and psychology, and I put them in their envelopes and I shuffled them around and I threw one in the bin and I posted one. So I left it entirely to the universe to decide my future for me. So I ended up going to Leeds University to study economics.
Did you?
Yeah, I was actually a bit better at psychology, and I didn't do a maths A level. And I just don't think they should let you do an economics degree without a maths A level because it was so hard.
That is, it's a hell of an approach to the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I wonder if that. I wonder what that says about you. How comfortable you are with risk, and how comfortable you are on
I'm
doing
very
things that you're not.
comfortable
You
with
know,
risk.
you're not really sure what might happen. It probably says a lot.
Yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
comfortable with risk.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you went and did economics. How did you enjoy Leeds? What was Leeds like as a economics student?
So the best thing that came out for me was the friendship group that I made, and it was my main expectation, and I don't know why that was, but my expectation of university was that you will meet your absolute friends for life there. That was it. It wasn't that you come out with a great degree and then get your career. It wasn't about the whole life experience thing. It was purely that you'll meet your friends for life. And that's exactly what I got. I mean, the 5 women that I am now best friends with were the people that I met in my first sort of 8 weeks. And it is just insane, the relationship we have. And I don't know if that's because that's what I was looking for and the manifestation that goes with that. I mean, there were lots of moving parts. We didn't start as a 5. People moved in and out of houses. We wouldn't have necessarily met. But it really feels like that was my destiny. Sounds such a, I don't know, rubbish word, but something along those lines. And that is the third pivotal moment that has shaped the person that I am today, that group.
And how did you meet those people then? How did they become like, so close to you? Was it through courses, just socials? Like, how did you get to know them?
They all lived in the halls that I lived with. So there might be an element in the halls that we all chose because it was the most autonomous stroke independent, which probably said something about the people that we were, and it was also one of the cheapest. Now, actually, my friends come from, they're probably a little bit more affluent in terms of some of their backgrounds, but maybe just the way that I think their parents have all really grafted, and they probably wanted their children to have a little bit more of an understanding about money. So I was potentially just a bit more aligned to them based on just those 2 factors than the school that I'd come from, which everybody had a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, some of it credit card money, and it was all for show. And you learnt that when you sort of got 16, 17, 18, but you don't know that straight away.
And I think quite a lot of people have those who go to university, and the people that they meet in the early days of university. I know I certainly have a group of friends of people that 20 years on, the people, some of them that you would pick the phone up to them first if you had something you had to deal with and the advice. And it's funny how people from different backgrounds can offer different perspectives and help you through tricky moments. They celebrate with you, and they'll also be an ear for you if you need to talk to them about something that's not quite worked out well. I know some of the other people I've spoken to have certainly referenced university or college or their first job as a place where they've met people who now are 20, 30 years on, they're still so close to them. And you can kind of move away from people, but it doesn't matter if you don't speak for a period of time. You've still got kind of a connection that's a bit deeper than just a transactional relationship that happens if you just meet people and work with them. You're living with these people, you're
Yeah.
spending a lot of time with them.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're really starting to discover who you really are from that time period. You're put under quite, well, I certainly was quite stressful situations. You have to be entirely financially responsible for yourself. You're obviously living on your own for the first time. Well, I was. You're in an education setting, so there's your own internal pressures to do that. I mean, my friends from school, they know you from 11 to 18, all that silliness and all the risks that you took and all the daft things that you did. And that's a bond that you will only ever have with those school friends, those high school friends. But I think I just feel so privileged to have met the girls that I met at the university. I'm sure they will come up at different points actually throughout this talk. But the key thing for me, it wasn't about like gaining that degree so much. It was about having those friendships. I mean, I'd come from quite a, my family broke up when I was 9, and all of the family, I didn't have that unit that I so craved. And whilst I did have that unit at high school, And I'm a real like belonging person. I mean, as human beings, you know, that's part of who we are anyway. But we did branch off after school. This was kind of like my second family. It really was, you know. And I think if I had to categorise them now, the biggest thing as to why we're so close is their ongoing, constant support with zero judgment. So just to have that, like, it sounds crazy, you know, you do have unconditional love from your family, but I really have got unconditional love with that friendship group. Now, I haven't always had that. I've had to earn that with them.
Yeah.
There is an element, it doesn't come straight away with family. And in fact, I think it will come up. There's a couple of funny stories of reference points where they were quite happy to just sack me off because I was a handful. And I wouldn't have blamed them. And because I was so mindful of what I would lose, fortunately, it was enough for me to stop in those ways.
So I was just thinking, I'm going to ask you a question now, and I'm going to ask you at the end. So this is an interesting one. How would those 5 ladies describe you when they first met you?
Okay. Wild, high energy, maybe a handful, very loyal. They would be the main things, I think. Very driven.
You think you'd have known, or they'd have known, or you'd have known back then that you were going to be successful, or you're ambitious, you wanted to own your own business? Do you think you'd have known that, or they'd have known that back then? Would that have been clear?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something you've always wanted to do?
Not necessarily own my own business, but be successful at what I set out to do. But for me now, success has to equate to fulfilment. My old definitions of success were, you know, being the highest paid friend in the group, the highest paid person, the biggest bonus, the highest sales number, etc. None of that means anything if I'm not happy. And also that happiness is within myself. It doesn't need to be external. Nobody else needs to know I'm happy. I just need to know I'm happy. And when that's truly enough, then I know I've hit my success factor.
And that kind of journey comes with experience, does it? It comes with a bit of a few grey hairs, a few years under the belt,
I've got any
a
grey hairs,
few
thank
bump
you.
knees and bump. Well, that's it. Unfortunately, I have, and it does. You have to live life a little bit to kind of understand that some of those things are really important and kind of become more important as you get older. But we'll come on to that. But let's kind of go back to that. And so Leeds University, economics degree. Were you a good student? Did you do well at the academic side?
No, I played in the sports teams, and being the best drinker and the most fun was a higher priority to me at that time.
That's the wild side then. That's definitely the wild side. So what was your first job then? So you do your degree, go for university. Where did your, what we call your professional career actually start, and where did you get going?
Yeah. So I've actually worked for as long as I have been able to work. So everyone talks about like their first job and it's like a paper round or anything. I've always had to work. My dad was a milkman, so as soon as I was literally 8 or 9, and that was around the time my parents split up. So if I was staying with my dad, I would have to go out on his milk round with him at 3 a.m, before school. So my work ethos and ethic and the discipline was instilled very, very early. So I worked all the way through uni because it was all self-funded, and I was shocking with money. I mean, really, really dreadful. And I remember opening 4 banks in one day just because I could get 4 overdrafts. So I had 8 grand in one day available to me in 2003. Like, that's just, I don't even know how that was allowed to happen. But I never had anyone to bail me out, so I ended up getting a lot of jobs very quickly because I was in a lot of financial debt. But to come back to your original question, my first professional job, so I left university, and all of my friends were, super bright, studious, on fantastic graduate programs, etc. And I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I'd never really thought about it. And as you can tell from swapping the UCAS forms, had never really had that path. So it was my mindset to just follow money, because money gave me freedom of choice. And in my mind, I could either be an economist, because obviously that's what I did, but the math side, my microeconomics exam and the math, like not doing maths A level, as I say, was a struggle for me. And I just stuck my head in the sand. I didn't go to any of my math seminars, so it was tricky. So the next biggest job for me was to be a lawyer, because that's where I thought loads of money was. So I applied for my graduate diploma in law, and then it would have been my LPC, I think it was, after that. So I got a flat in Leeds city centre. One friend stayed on because she changed courses, so she still had a year left. And I remember, I think I needed about £55,000 over the 2 years to cover living and the 2 courses. And I applied for the loan. NatWest very, very easily gave it me, despite my awful financial track record. And I got the loan letter saying I'd been approved. So it's £54,000 to be exact, and that's what I would have owed after the 2 years. And £54,000 in 2006, like, I just remember being utterly terrified. On top of my student loan, on top of the debts that I'd racked up, and I just thought, I will never, ever, ever be financially free. I have nobody to bail me out at all. I remember asking my mum once for £11 because I'd gone over my Barclays overdraft, and I think you used to get charged, it was like 25 or 35 quid if you went over, and I asked to borrow the 11 to not get charged the 25, and she said no, and God did I hate her at the time. But fair play, it certainly gave me a lesson that I needed, because it was this, you are doing this yourself. You wanted to go to uni, therefore you will deal with what choices you make. So I deferred entry for 12 months. I panicked. Deferred entry, and I thought I will get a job for 12 months, save as much as that as I can, and then I'll go next year. So I didn't know what to apply for. There was a young lad who lived in the flat that I lived in. And my word, honestly, what an absolute stereotypical recruiter back in 2006. He genuinely had braces and a pinstripe suit. He was Southern, so he had that sort of Cockney twang. And I was like, what? And he came home and had this shiny watch, and he came home with this like bottle of something like fabulous. And I just remember being like in utter awe. Like, you're in your 20s, how have you afforded all this?
I want some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, more for me, there was like an internal referral scheme, so he just sold it to me like it was going to be the best job of my life. So I went to one interview, which ended up being 4 interviews. I didn't interview anywhere else. I didn't look at any other recruitment companies. But they were so fabulous in the way that if they saw something in you, I just remember being like closed and not knowing what closing was. And I remember when they offered me that job, me genuinely thinking this was the best thing of my life. And I was so utterly grateful. But that's what they do. Like, that's what they get you to believe. I fit the profile. Working class background, well educated, had to work for money, broken home, didn't have anyone. Like, I was literally tick, tick, tick. So I joined that business when I think I was on £17,000 a year. Luckily, the office was opposite my flat, so I only had a 5-minute commute, because they were like 12, 13, 14-hour days for the 18 months I was there. It was savage. Yeah. And the work hard, play hard was absolutely prevalent. So I did that job. And when I came to do my...
What was that company called? What was the name of the company?
They were called Pathway Resourcing, and they were part of the S3 group. in Leeds. I think they've changed to real staffing now.
You were there for 18 wild months where
18 wild
where
months.
you kind of learned everything about recruiting, and that was your first kind of behind the scenes. This is how it works and what happened.
Yeah, but I was never that good at it, or at least I didn't think I was. There was so many other people that were so much better than me, so I always just felt really inferior. But that company, they were so fabulous at actually doing everything right in terms of every bit of training process. I mean, it was the most wonderful foundation, but you didn't really know that at the time. It was only when I came out of that business and joined somewhere else where you have that jaw-dropping moment and look at your new set of colleagues and go, oh my God, like, where have you lot come from, sort of thing. Like, they were just incredible. And actually, I learned what I learned in that 18 months, I think stood me for like 10, 15 years. It was that good, but you didn't know that at the time. You were just grateful to have a job. So grateful
Oh,
that you could come in on a Saturday and
yeah.
help implement a new CRM because they were giving you some pizza at lunch.
And so at that time, then, are there people who professionally started to become coaches, mentors, whatever you want to call it, who helped guide you, or was it still like first job, quite transactional? You just getting on with it and having a good time.
It was quite transactional, but the biggest thing that stood out to me was that I had 3 female bosses in my hierarchy, and I didn't see that as unusual at the time. But I was very mindful it was quite male dominated. The business I worked for was quite an even split, I would have said. And maybe at board level it might have been, male dominated, but I had 3 women, and in fact, one of those women now, who is a really successful co founder for a great recruitment business in Leeds, well, UK wide actually, well, globally. And she's one of my best friends now. But we didn't have that. Like, there was a professional element. So whilst they were friendly and supportive, it was only really when I left did we become so close. And I think we admired each other, but also, like, I guess the biggest thing why we've become so close is our shared passion, again, for that kind of that people side. Just looking at everything holistically, like, what's the purpose of this? Like, it's not, yeah, that was a really big thing for me. And as I say, I didn't know that at the time. And I was really sad because after my second job, I only stayed there about 9 or 10 months. They closed the office. Like I say, it was quite poor standard, really. I remember going in on my first week and there was a guy in the corner with a newspaper circling. I mean, like, the internet had come out, but he was just circling jobs to try and, like, pull leads off. To find businesses. I was like, what's going on here? So then I ended up having like a third recruitment job after that, and I don't know what it was like for you and maybe your career, but 3 recruitment jobs in 3 years felt like career suicide. I was 24 and, like, I genuinely felt depressed, like I'd ruined my whole life. Yeah, so that was really challenging.
15, 20 years ago, changing jobs every few years would be a big no-no if somebody came across your CV. And now it's much more accepted. People feel like they've got more choice. People feel more ownership of their own careers and will move more often. So I think definitely the last 10, 15 years, that has gone from an absolute no-no in the way that you felt to just being a bit more. That's kind of how the new generation of the workforce operate.
Definitely.
So you ended up with 3 jobs in 3-4 years, and this was your third recruitment job. And what happened then? Talk us through the next few years. What happened or changed in your career?
I didn't particularly love the recruitment side of things. It suited my personality, but it was quite tech heavy. And actually, the people you were talking to, the stereotype of highly introverted people, certainly 20 years ago, again, was much more common. I guess what I missed out before was when I came to my 12-month mark, whilst I was on a 17,000 salary, I think in my first year, maybe I earned total maybe 28 to 30k, and my friends on the graduate programs hadn't earned that in their first year. And just that, that kind of silly competitive side of me was like, I'm now not going to leave this job when I'm going to go and get myself in loads of debt and I'm actually out earning everybody anyway. So that's why I chose to stay. And I'm so glad I did, because I really struggle reading very detailed documentation. So I have no idea how I'd be a lawyer. Like, there's absolutely no way I could have done that job.
Yeah.
So thank the universe for that, really. So yeah, had my third recruitment job. And then if I think about, like, I'd come from like a really cutthroat couple of years, and the only criteria that I had for this third role was that I found people to work for who displayed kindness. And there were two male bosses, and I just got a really nice warm feeling from them. And they were lovely. They were really, really lovely. I worked there for about 3.5 years. I had a gap in the middle for some personal reasons. And that I wouldn't have been allowed to go back into a recruitment. You know, you would have burnt that bridge, and they actually welcomed me back, which is, again, a credit to them, really. That was Jeff and Sat. So the company was called iSource in Leeds. But it was becoming really stale for me. I was about 26, 27. I didn't own anything. I was the top performer, but the top performer there probably would have been a mid-table performer at a really, really high performance environment. So I was mindful that I probably needed to move, but I felt really loyal to those employers. And it was just by chance. I think I'd had a bad day one day, and I just took a phone call that happened to be a rec to rec. And I remember her saying to me, you know, what would you leave your business for? And I said, to be honest, I couldn't work for a competitor in Leeds because it would feel too disloyal. So if it's outside of Leeds, that's the only way I'd consider it. And she said, well, we have a Manchester office. And I'd been in Leeds 10 years. My best friends had left. I'd done my 20s there, you know, lots of clubbing, lots of partying. Didn't own anything, as I said earlier, was earning really good money, but really mindful that I was still racking up debt. And I kind of just felt I needed to have a bit of a word with myself, if I'm honest. So I, again, didn't look anywhere else. I just went for that set of interviews, which was for the Rethink group in Manchester. And it just felt the right time. Like, it felt good. The bosses, again, were very different. So they were nice, and I was still getting that niceness, but the performance standards felt greater. But deep in my heart, I didn't still love recruitment. And that was a problem. And I actually said that in my final interview to the CEO. And whilst he responded quite well at the time, he actually called me a couple of days later and said, look, this is a red flag for us. You've just basically told us that you don't like the kind of job that you do, despite you doing it really well. So I did have some backtracking to do on that phone call. That was a little bit of a swallow my pride moment, and just kind of say what I needed to say, because by that point I'd made up my mind that I was moving to Manchester.
Yeah. When you joined them eventually, right? You joined
I did.
Rethink and were with them for quite a period of time.
Yeah, I was. And I think that the key element of my success there was the autonomy that was enabled. I'd received that a little bit in my previous environment, certainly not the first two, zero autonomy. But actually that was fantastic for learning something. That level of discipline and just kind of copy paste set me up really well. But then when you add autonomy into that, I think if you've got good personal values, you can really carve something quite great. So for me, having the foundations of how to do the job and the autonomy to build really, really great relationships with people, you know, didn't have to hit the numbers like I had to, so I could have deeper, more meaningful connections with people. I could say no to people I didn't want to work with. You know, I can think of a few people that they're just not particularly pleasant people, but you'd do anything to kind of get the fee. They might be hiring managers, it might be the ethics of the business. And whilst I still wanted to be a top performer, and you quite often sit on that fence where you're like, oh, do I do this because I really need that? Or am I going to pull away? And I've done both, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly no angel. There's some times I've taken work where it's gone against really what I've believed in. But I do also truly believe that has enabled me to be stronger in my decision making now. You know, when it's my own business, I've learned from those sorts of mistakes. Karma always comes round. It always ended badly. So that early fee was utterly pointless in the long run.
Do you think that, I don't know whether you thought about it this way, but to me, having hear you talk about it, that comes back to things like, yeah, your dad having a farming background, growing up on a farm, and working hard, and I know that in kind of rural agriculture, your word means a lot, and if you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you don't just do something for a quick buck. Totally something there that maybe sticks with you over time.
I've never thought of that, genuinely. But my word does mean a lot. Like, I don't need a contract, and I do take it. Like, my word is everything. And yeah, if I think about my dad, that's probably the case. I mean, my dad's definitely let me down at times, but he also did the best he could at the time. Nobody's perfect, are they? So we actually have a great relationship now, which is nice to say.
So your time at Rethink, I mean, I think you will be underplaying yourself. I think when you look at some of the stuff that you did there, you had an incredibly successful period of years with them, winning different trips, winning awards, being top biller. You progressed really well with them as a company.
Yeah, I did, and I loved my time there. I learnt a lot. I think a real pivotal moment when I was there was when they made an acquisition for a company called Digital Gurus. And whilst I had some good bosses, some not so good, but they each had their own strengths and weaknesses, as I guess everybody does. And you kind of take from that what you will when you're on your own journey. But there was one boss that stood out for me. He was the founder and owner of Digital Gurus, a guy called Farouk. And I actually handed my notice in to him and my CEO about a month after that acquisition. I'd done recruitment for a really long time. There was a theme throughout that sort of 10-12 year period, from getting that very first job back in Leeds to this present moment, of I still don't feel like this is me necessarily, despite being able to run and lead teams in my own way. And I really, really thrived when I had that level of autonomy. But I handed my notice in. I was going to go travelling. I had it booked. It was a 12-month trip around the world. It was with somebody that I'd met a few months earlier, and handed my notice in. And it was Farouk that offered me an opportunity that I didn't realise at the time I wanted. And it was essentially to take his brand and build a northern presence with the Digital Gurus brand. Rightly or wrongly at the time, it was going to be in competition with Rethink, separate P&Ls. We were even going to separate, well, we did, we separated the CRM, we separated all systems. And that was maybe my first taste of what running your own business would be like. But I still had that lovely blanket of my salary and bosses and things. But I felt I really thrived in that. And the fact that he as a leader was great with guidance, but he had he barely knew me, genuinely barely knew me. But he just had this absolute belief in me. And if I reflect on it now, it might have been partly how I showed up, but I also think it's part of who he was as a person, that he just had belief in people and that enabled the best out of them. And I'm sure that it wouldn't have always been a successful method for him, because naturally you might believe in some people that then let you down. I don't really know, and I've never really asked him that. But it certainly worked for me. It brought out the best in me, and it just gave us an incredible footing to flourish and build something from the start. And essentially that brand grew from myself, zero. I took 2 people out of my team with me. But after 12 months, we were outperforming the established Rethink business that was 30 consultants, and we were less than a quarter of the number, the headcount.
Wow.
I wasn't so bothered about the travel, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I could have travelled at 18 or any other time. I love a holiday. It wouldn't be unknown for me to have 10 holidays a year. I love a deal. I love a 3 a.m. flight, less so now. But I do love seeing the world. And I just made a promise to myself that as long as I could still do that, but at holiday times, then I would try this career opportunity. So yeah, I think he gave me a month off actually. I went to the Philippines and Thailand just to kind of scratch a little bit of that itch before I took the job on. So that was really cool. And yeah, I think after 12 months, I was offered the Digital Guru's job as well. And I was actually given the choice. You can either be the director, the brand manager, whatever you want to call it, for both businesses and keep them running separately, or you can merge the two. And a big gap in what I felt in my own leadership was molding teams together who didn't necessarily like each other. I always use the analogy. I mean, obviously, this is properly blowing my own trumpet because I certainly don't think I'm Pep Guardiola or Alex Ferguson. But I likened it to saying to Manchester United and Manchester City, we're not having two teams anymore, we're just having Manchester. And I was reading all like these amazing leadership books and I was really just enjoying being a leader, but I'd always built from the ground up. That is how I'd done all my leadership teams. And I just felt like I was missing a part of my skill set because a really talented leader would be enabling teams to work well together that have come, that you've inherited essentially. That was a big challenge for me personally.
So did you bring the two together, or did you keep them separate? Did you bring them together? Like what actually happened?
So I brought them together. Bearing in mind they'd spent 12 months coming in the same lift and some turning left and some turning right, sharing a kitchen, fighting for customers, arguing all the time about this. I mean, it was really quite like fractious. But I really relished in that opportunity. I think I got rid of half the people. So that was quite, I don't think I was that liked for that move, but it was necessary because there were some people that had been there quite a long time that I just thought brought negative values to the team. And I was in it for the long run, not short-term gain. And whilst they were good performers on paper, they had the wrong attitude, if I'm honest. So yeah, it was a real challenge, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I loved my whole time there, really, and it just grew and grew and grew, and it was brilliant. And I think I know I had year-on-year growth, all the way until we finished. I mean, even COVID, we did great. We were the highest performing division during COVID, and I just put that entirely down to having really, really great people who had each other's backs and just really cared for each other. It just wasn't a classic recruitment business where it was all about the money. Like, it certainly was about performing really well. But when you had such diverse groups of people who brought so much, and then they had that core to them that was kindness, acceptance of others and differences, it just enriches an environment. That's certainly my experience.
Well, I think just like listening to you talk about the different kind of chapters or chapters of your career, or you growing up and maturing and learn a few more things about life. There's some decisions in there that you almost didn't make, and like the traveling one, you almost didn't take that job opportunity, and the fact that you did, probably at the time you maybe didn't realize how significant it was going to be. And same with like doing things at university. I know like the decisions gone to economics was chance. It could have been something else, but though making those friends, staying in touch with those friends, making the decision not to do law at the time, it kind of maybe they felt really significant, but looking back, they probably feel even more significant now. And the decisions that you almost didn't make than they did at the time.
Definitely. And on the economic side, like my business modules that came out of that's where I really lit up. I really enjoyed that side of things, even just the graduate enterprise and all of those various things, which I probably wouldn't have known so much. As I say, my mum was a stay-at-home mum. She had a background in social work, and my dad was a farmer. But I didn't have any business people around me. I didn't have relationships with auntie or uncles. We lived in a really rural environment. I just hung out on the farm with my brothers all the time. A little bit more mindful of it with my friends' parents from secondary school. But yeah, I wasn't that savvy about the commercial world until I went to university.
And I suppose and when you're at Digital Gurus, you get given that opportunity to basically build a business within a business. do a lot of stuff that you've never done before, take P&L, like major P&L responsibility. That's when, is that the period of time when you start thinking about owning your own business, or was running that business something that you thought you'd just do forever? So when did you start thinking about, actually, I might want to own my own business in the future or do this myself, or did it just happen rather than it was a plan?
No, I really enjoyed running that business. And it was always quite transparently communicated that I would have an opportunity to potentially lead that business. In fact, when Farouk stepped aside, because he was my CEO, and even when I became, I think I was regional director. No, sorry, head of UK sales. And then when he stepped away from being CEO, a new CEO was brought in. I was actually on maternity leave, I think, but within a couple of months of me coming back, that's when I was presented with the opportunity to become the managing director under the new CEO. And he was very open about, he had his own personal plan, sort of 3-4 years maximum he wanted to exit. So it was quite clear that he needed a succession plan and that I was a really strong candidate for that. And I was really excited by that. I hadn't necessarily thought about it much prior to that. It was always quite natural and organic in terms of the growth. I was always looking for the next thing, but I hadn't really gone, oh, I want the CEO role necessarily. When that particular CEO went through an MBO, I remember being really hurt that I wasn't invited as part of that group. I felt I'd worked there 12 years, earned my stripes. And I don't think it was anything other than it was just less people to share the pie with at the time. 3 people acted selfishly in inverted commas, and their plan from their MBO was to then sell to maybe, let's say, me and a couple of others. So the next wave of an MBO. So I was, again, excited by that, very, very bought into that vision. But then the economy slowly started changing, like sort of after that boom year after COVID. So sort of I think it was Q4 2022, we had our lowest growth quarter. But we'd had such high growth. And as I say, the foundations were strong, they were solid. I wasn't worried, but things were changing and I couldn't put my finger on why. I'm very intuitive. And my nervous system was just thrown out every single day. And I couldn't put on it why. I'm quite a direct person. I appreciate people talking directly to me and being very honest. And where you always feel like you're missing something. And I was questioning my own intelligence at times, thinking, what am I missing here? And no doubt there will have been gaps in perhaps some of the things that I brought to the table at that time, I'm sure, because I was still on my own journey as well. But in terms of what I offered, from my loyalty, my commitment, everything that I'd built, my credibility, my track record. And unfortunately, it all ended just one day. I was completely blindsided. I went into a one-to-one. And my HR director was in Manchester. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. She lived in, Surrey, Kent. And I was very confused why she was in the office, because there was nobody else there. I'd called a board meeting for my leadership team. And my CEO asked me, do I want to do my one-to-one a bit earlier because I was in the office earlier? I said, yeah, sure, no problem, I'm here. And then when he walked into the meeting room, the HR director also walked into that meeting room. So I just took a quick diversion to the toilet and had a very stark reality hit me of, okay, could this potentially be the thing that I'm dreading? Like, I just was not expecting this. However, it had happened to other people in the previous few months. I just hadn't thought it'd been happening to me. I'd been privy to those conversations. I was sort of in the inner circle, if you will. But quite clearly my face didn't fit anymore. So after an hour listening to all the reasons that I was potentially not the right fit, I exited that day. And I never had a plan B. So
Wow.
going back to the question of, had I thought of running my own recruitment business? Definitely not. But when I did my coaching qualification, I was mindful that there may be a day in the future that I don't want to do recruitment. There is so much hard graft, and actually I'm quite an emotional person at times, and little things could really affect you. It only takes one person to let you down, and again, we're human. We let people down all the time, well, certainly some people do. And I just didn't enjoy being almost like beholden to other people's actions. So I always thought, I used to write it in my goals, when I turn 40, I will have my own coaching business. But this happened in 2023. So I think I must have been, 38? So 2 years too early for me. And recruitment's what I know, it's what I do well. I had really good relationships. So I took some time off, and essentially then set up the recruitment business.
It must have been, shocking, distressing, like, kind of throw your whole world upside down if you're not expecting it. It must have been such a difficult thing to
It was awful.
work through.
Yeah, it was awful. Absolutely awful. Yeah, I can't even say it's necessarily made me a stronger person.
What do you do if you have after you have that meeting? You're shocked. What happens? You walk out of that meeting, and what do you do over the next few days? Like, how do you manage to deal with that kind of earthquake that's just happened under your feet?
So have had two children, and ever since having those children, they are like my absolute central joy. I think having that and that being my absolute number one enabled everything to be just that bit easier, because I had something that was so much more valuable and important to me than that job, despite it being extremely valuable and very important. I'm also one of those people, like, fortunately, touch wood, I've always had like fairly good health, despite a couple of like scares. I've always had good health. So just being able to say, like, yes, I've received this news today, but somebody else is receiving, they might have a terminal illness, and I know I'd take my news all day long. So that just really helped ground me. But at the same time, it doesn't take away from your reality. So that shock and upsetness and anger at times, and feel like you've been let down, and then what follows from that you don't plan on, is the questioning of your own self-worth and what you could have done differently, what actions you could have taken. You put it all on yourself at the end of the day, because it happened to me, but I absolutely have to take responsibility for that. So from a confidence perspective, it's quite shattering. And taking some time off was very useful for that. But nobody necessarily would understand how I felt, because whilst I have a good family, like, my family couldn't say what I did for a job, as many families can't. And my friends are supportive, but they're all full-time working mums. And it's not the same as when you're 21 and something goes wrong and you just jump in their room and cry all night and watch Friends. Like, that's not a thing anymore because everybody's busy. So whilst I had some support, it really did centralise to me that building my own coping strategies and resilience was going to be really important for my future. And actually it has been, because I would say, I've certainly not had a life of no upset, but that was a real real low blow moment. And I do think it set me up for some things that have happened in the last couple of years. It's enabled me to deal with those things a little bit greater.
Was it at the time with the people who were there to able to kind of help you process what you were going through and figure out your next steps? So were Were you trying to do that on your own? You say your family obviously don't understand. I think that's something for everybody like that.
Yeah.
You don't really understand what to do. But I imagine a lot of the relationships that you had were in that business, right? And people that you trusted and knew were in the business that you one day were there, next day you weren't.
Yeah, I'd almost put it into sort of two groups of people. I had all the people that I had either hired or supported the hiring of, that I knew them inside and out, and I had to completely cut myself off from them because of things like NDAs, and I hadn't navigated this before. So I felt that I wasn't being true to myself, and for me, honesty is a real high value of mine. I literally just had to like go quiet for a period of time. And even then, I couldn't really have truthful conversations with a lot of people about what had happened. So that really got to me and really saddened me, and is probably the reason I don't have any of those relationships anymore. I don't think there's any bad relationships with anyone in that group of people, but you just don't have it anymore. You move on. And I've worked for places where people leave and you're really sad in the first instant, but you just get on with it. It is part of business. But the other group of people, which was probably what I would say were my closest to like my inner circle, and that could have been anywhere on the hierarchy, they were just very key people, either within my leadership team or within my line management or anything like that. Just some of the narrative that came out was very, very ambiguous, and it left me with a lot of unanswered questions, and nothing gave me any level of certainty anymore. And I guess what I mean by that is I didn't know who I could trust. So my coping strategy there was to not really risk anything. I'd already kind of, what I thought was, lost everything, and I had been very trusting. I defended a lot of people constantly, and it almost like, I don't know, shot me in the foot, if that's the right phrase.
Yeah, feels like it came back to bite you a little bit. It might feel
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And you know what? I've no doubt that there will be a couple of people that have also shared as strong a loyalty, you know, as strong kind of a moral compass on transparency and truth. But it really was left a little bit like, you know, changing room gossip. So it was almost easier to sort of exit and start afresh.
So you leave and you exit, start afresh. How long did it then take you to start thinking about, right, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to set my own business up and I'm going to own my own destiny now going forward? How long did that process take? And then what did it look like? Did you go through kind of steps to set stuff up? Kind of bring us forward now into like the most kind of amazing business that you've been able to set up around the things that are most important to you.
Well, bizarrely, it was a conversation during COVID. So this was 2 years prior to all of this happening. And I was on maternity leave. And it was simply a conversation with my partner around, like, what do we want? You know, where you just, I mean, I love doing this, that whole like just dreaming, speaking freely. Yeah, just envisaging what could be. And there is a Japanese concept called ikigai, and I wasn't familiar with it at the time, but essentially we were having a conversation about what our ikigai was. And the concept is finding three things. So one is something that the world needs and will pay for, something that you're good at, so you have a skill level in it, but also something that you're passionate about. And if you can find the thing that combines all three, that is your ikigai. So I loved my job. I was good at my job. Recruitment was needed. It paid well. But was it my true passion? I mean, the people definitely was, without a doubt. But there were perhaps some things missing. And I think most people, if they ask themselves those three things, have I got my ikigai, if you will? And when we talked about it, my partner was very, very into fitness and health and nutrition. I was very into the coaching side of things. As I said, I'd had a personal transformative experience, which was a real key moment for the direction that my life went in, but also enabling myself to be honest with who I was and just feeling really proud of that, rather than, I feel like the world has become so externally verified and that's necessary. And I was noticing myself doing things for external validation, and that's actually not me at all. So we actually set up a group of businesses, and I mean, we're novices, we were naive, it was COVID. So we were like, how do you set a business up then? Well, surely the first thing you do, register your domain name to make sure nobody steals it. I don't know who we thought we were. And register on Companies House. So we set up a business. It was just a group of businesses, and it was just the Define group. Because something that I'd sort of learned over my whole journey was that everybody's definition of anything is entirely different. So my definition of success, my definition of happiness, entirely different, even to my best friend, even to my partner. And that fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me, especially around people when you ask them what makes them happy or why do they do the things they do. And recruitment is really good at teaching you to go much below those surface level answers. And whilst you can do that in a job profile or, you know, understanding what people are looking for, actually just to do that in life, you know, I do it with my friends. How are we really fulfilled? Where do we find our uttermost joy? So we set this up, and we didn't know what it was going to look like going forward. I thought I would have a coaching career based on that I could travel anywhere and all I would need is a laptop. And again, COVID was sort of accelerating that possibility. So it was a couple of years later, my husband had actually already started doing that recruitment business very slowly, but he worked within HR. So I didn't actually sit there and say, okay, how am I going to set up a recruitment business? It was, there's a group of businesses there. We've got, you know, we can set up a bank account, and I know how to do recruitment. So maybe that's just a bit of a quick win, just from a financial perspective. I obviously had a good network of some people. If anything, it worked to my advantage because I hadn't been a recruiter for over 8 or 9 years. So actually my relationships were with people who were all on boards of businesses, from the senior roles in which I recruited for. And then I balanced it with some coaching, sometimes within businesses, sometimes within individuals. And then just slowly and organically, it grew from there. Sort of towards the end of 2023, I took the summer off with my children, which is where my idea came from, that part of me having my own business, it would fit around what I truly wanted, and that was always time. So I decided to always commit to every school holiday, not working unless I really, really wanted to. And actually there are some elements of my job that I just love so much, particularly the coaching side and some of the business coaching that I do. And obviously, look, if you've got a big project at the start of the summer holidays, you know it's going to take you 2 weeks. Of course you're going to do that. So on occasion, I've done little bits of that, but yeah, never at the compromise of the time so far. And I wrote myself a kind of like a manifesto in the October. So that was October 2023. Because I didn't feel confident enough to post it. Posting was kind of a big thing. Everyone was kind of starting their own businesses. It was post-COVID, loads of redundancies, loads of exits. And it's hard not to get a bit of FOMO. But also what I drew from that was more inspiration, really, than envy. And I wrote myself quite a large document that was, if in 1 year from now I have done this. And it'd be far too long and detailed to go through it all. But some of the key parts of it were around earning either the same or more, but significantly reducing the time that I worked. And I do have a strong belief that, you know, if you become an expert in a certain field, you can still have like fantastic output with a reduced level of input. And it's just about finding that equilibrium of what you're looking for. I changed some of the things that I spent money on, of what was important to me, and it all became about disposable income. And I reread it on October the 1st of 2024. So it's actually mind-blowing that I'm coming up to 2025 But I achieved that and more. Now in 2023, I think I was still angry and hurt, and I really wanted like to post it and be like, look, everybody, don't subscribe to this burnout, rat race, profit pumping cycle that the UK makes you believe you need to be in. But I didn't, for whatever reason. And yeah, I guess my journey is like still going from there.
How did you come up with it? Like, did you talk to people about what was going in that manifesto? How did you even start getting anything down on paper?
Do you know what? I honestly don't know. I like writing, so I might scribble. I like writing poetry. I like lists. I like writing. So I think it was maybe just a day of, I don't actually know what was going through my head at the time. I'd be lying if I said I was inspired because I could have just been angry and wanted to prove a point. It's highly possible. But I became really, really mindful of how precious time is. And obviously, loads and loads of people talk about it. And I see, bearing in mind, I work in recruitment, so I'm constantly talking to either people hiring, people moving jobs, all of that and what it looks like. Like the UK is literally built on this machine. That is the main factor. Jobs, careers, businesses, profitability, economic growth. And I was determined. You know, when people say, you know, I spoke to, you know, whoever on their deathbed, and the one thing, and it's a consistent theme that everybody says, which is, I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I spent more time with my kids. I think that would come up as quite a majority regret for a lot of people. Now, I felt like I'd been handed a golden ticket because I had two children a little bit later. So it was in my sort of mid 30s, and my career was really flourishing at that time. And I also had a baby during COVID. So actually, my time at home was by far greater than it would have been for any other full-time working mum, say 7 or 8 years ago. So I'd had a taste of time with such young, precious people. And as I touched on earlier, like that is where my absolute true joy centralizes. Like I am at my happiest Saturday morning, Sunday morning, doing a jigsaw, breakfast everywhere, chatting, laughing, just all of that. That is my absolute joy, and nothing beats that. No holiday, no bonus, no paycheck, nothing even comes close. So I just had that as my focus. And in order to enable that, it was never about earning so much that I could retire early, because that time's gone. I don't know that I'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow is not guaranteed for a single person. So having lots of time was my primary driver, and I wanted to understand where I could have maximum efficiency with my input and achieve the output I needed to pay my mortgage, hit my savings target, do the things I wanted to, but without stretching myself. And that's what I worked on in the first year.
In the space of 45 minutes, an hour, we've covered like a long period of your life, but it feels like such a polar opposite to when you look back at Toni, who went to university. Toni, you'd said friends would describe you as being wild, bit of a handful. To be able to come around in that kind of full circle approach, going through like I would say a fairly traumatic experience where you think you're really into the job that you're doing, you're bought into a career and a business and what you think your life might look like, go through a huge change to then design your own business around the way you want to live your life, which is wholly centered around your family and your kids. It's incredible.
Yeah, I feel really, really privileged, and it has been so hard at times, but I always just centre back to that I have good health, and the phrase 100 men have 100 wishes, 100 healthy men have 100 wishes, and one unhealthy man only has one. Or woman, I should say. I should definitely say woman, but the phrase was by a man about a man. And I I'm so grateful that I have good health. So the rest is just here to live and enjoy, just do my best.
So we're getting towards October now. So what's the asking yourself that question, if in 1 year from now I have done XYZ, what do you think's on the horizon next?
I think with my current ethos of really homing in to what brings me the most happiness, and I mean that like in the moment. So you know when I can liken it to when I go for a run, and every now and again it might be the song in your ears or it might just be something, but you know that rush of endorphins that you just get. I normally get it about 10-15 minutes into my run. It lasts about 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm like, God, I love exercise and it's great to have that. When I get that feeling, that's what I want to home in on. And I used to get it in recruitment when I would either make a placement, get a big paycheck in my bank. They were mainly the two things actually. Now I get it sometimes straight off a coaching call where there's been like not even necessarily a significant change, just a shift, just a real moment with that person that we have shared together. But where I really get it, I mean, we're talking multiple times during the day, is on the retreats. And that is because the people that are there, which they're not necessarily pre-vetted, there is an element and there is some gut instinct with, obviously people reach out their interest and then you kind of do a little bit of background on them, and sometimes it's a referral or whatever. And I have only done 2, so this certainly may change. But of the 2 that I've done, the 20 people that I've met both times, that feeling, that rush of this is what life's about, I must get 15, 20, 30 times during those retreats of just flooded emotion. And it's either gratitude, joy, sadness, empathy. And having that feels really, really special. So doing that more while seeing places in the world I want to see, whilst having my own time, this is segmented time for me too, to think. How many leaders and CEOs say to their teams, or that their mentors or coaches say to them, what's your thinking time? When do you just sit and think? It's in all the books. It's highly proven to be successful, but not many people do it. And actually, I've noticed just how valuable that time is. So I would hope that I can do more of those, that they just tick everything that I love. That freedom. I get to choose where I do them. I get to spend time with different people. I get to add value. I get to have that sense of belonging in a new group. I get to upskill myself because it means I am constantly practicing my coaching. So yeah, in a year from now, it would be great. I started doing a new website in January, and we had a suicide in our family. So it's taken so many stop gaps in my professional career for various different reasons. So I've still not launched my website, and it's so close to being launched. But even just to have a website that combines the 3 businesses, the recruitment, the wellness retreats, the coaching, that will feel really nice, just to kind of, be able to say to the world, this is what I offer, and if it aligns with you, let's connect.
I would bet an awful lot of money that you will be achieving those things in 12 months' time. I think when you look at kind of what you've already done and been able to put together, like I think we're probably going to be seeing you doing many more of those retreats in the next 12 months, and the website will be done in no time. I think when you're building a business, things take priority, and if if you don't need a website or something like that, it doesn't really matter, because you can just tell in the way you talk about what people take from being on the retreats, what you learn, time it gives you, and then the balance that you're able to build in with spending time with your family. It's so authentic that people will naturally be drawn to it. So I've got absolutely no doubt that in 12 months' time, you're going to have been everywhere around the world running as many retreats as you want to, and no more, I would imagine. I said I would come back to one question that I started with earlier, we talked about earlier. The ladies that you talked about, your closest friends from university, I asked how they would describe you when they first met you. Well, how do you think they would describe you now?
Do you know what? So one of those ladies, she left me a lovely voice note. We leave each other 25-minute voice notes, right? Which I personally think is highly normal, but apparently it's quite shocking to everybody else. But we do like the first part of our run catching up. It's how we catch up. And she left me a voice note 2 days ago. And yeah, it actually makes me I'm pausing a little bit because it makes me quite emotional to say it. And it's not like me to, yeah, sorry. So she said how inspiring I was because of how I show up given everything that's happened in the last sort of year or two. And it was so lovely to hear that from somebody that you love so much. They would also describe me as very, very loyal, very genuine, and a really good mum and friend. Yeah, maybe still a little bit wild on occasion.
I think you're so lucky to have friends and people who will spend 25 minutes to send you a voice note is a little bit extreme, I would say, but each to their own. But whoever that person is, I think most people would probably agree and be saying something very similar on those lines. Toni, it has been incredible to talk to you. An amazing dive into an amazing life and career. Anyone wants to get in touch, people want to get in touch with you, find out more about you and the businesses, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the website is under work. So it's the www.thedefinegroup.com. But it won't be there yet, so maybe just after the summer holidays. For anything to do with the retreats, it's just Define Wellness Retreats on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I guess really my LinkedIn page, which is just my name, Toni Phoenix-Coles. There's not another one of me, so it should be okay to find. And I'm pretty good at keeping up with messages. So I'd love anyone to reach out for any reasons, really. Big believer in the universe. So if this resonates, you want to connect, then I'd love that. I really would. And also, I'm super grateful. I've really enjoyed just chatting with you, Jack. So what you're doing, there's no doubt this is going to be a great success because it's just a really nice conversation.
We shall speak soon.
Amazing. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.